Hey everyone. I made it to the Last Bookstore in downtown LA for the first time in a while, and I picked up some interesting books, so I figured I'd talk about them. One of my favorite authors is Evelyn Waugh, the author of Brightside Revisited and Scoop and a bunch of other famous books. And he wrote, at the end of his career, a lesser known series of books called the Sort of Honor Trilogy that details a man's experience in World War II. And as with a lot of his other books, it's sort of loosely based on his experience in the military in World War II. And so I've read the first two books in this series, and I wanted to read the third one this fall. And fortunately for me, actually, at the Last Bookstore, they had a first edition of the book. Now, this is the American first edition. It was published by Little Brown. It came out in 1961. And there's actually a British first edition as well, which actually has a different title. It's called Unconditional Surrender. So they sort of pulled kind of a Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's / Philosopher's Stone type thing, where they had a different title on the British version and then one for the American audience. And so I was actually really excited to find this. It actually wasn't even in the rare book section, which they have there. And so I just found it out in the general book collection and only paid $5 for it. So it's actually probably not worth that much because it's not one of his better known books, but I was still really excited to find it. Actually, I was on Twitter a couple days ago this week, and someone posted that they had gotten a first edition of Truman Capote's In Cold Blood, which I was actually kind of envious of. But actually, it turns out that that wasn't in the general book area. It was actually in the special book section. So it probably cost quite a bit more. So I don't know, even if I had seen it, if I would have bought it. But it was kind of an interesting idea. I didn't even see it when I was in there. So I guess I can't feel too bad. I guess I wasn't paying close enough attention to see it. So in addition to that book, I also found this in the dollar book section. The Last Bookstore, back when me and my friends started going to their new location in downtown about 7 or 8 years ago, almost the entire top section of the bookstore was dollar books because they were just buying a lot of books in bulk and kind of putting them up there. And now pretty much everything up there is categorized. But back then the categorization wasn't as strong because they were, I guess, sifting through so many books and they didn't have as many visitors. So they did have some of the sort of genre sections that they have now up there, but they weren't as well established, and the books were cheaper back then because the whole section of the upstairs was dollar books. But now the bookstore really only has dollar books, to my knowledge, in the sort of foyer area near the bag check area in the front of the store. So sometimes I kind of hang out in there and kind of look at dollar books, though the pickings are pretty slim these days. So actually what I found is this book, which is called A Life of James Boswell. It's by Peter Martin. Now, I've been intrigued by the Samuel Johnson and James Boswell relationship for a while, though. While I've read some of Dr. Johnson's writings, I actually have not read The Life of Samuel Johnson. I hope to do that in the future. It's kind of a long book, and I just finished reading Infinite Jest, and while I like long books, I don't like hauling them in my backpack for weeks or months on end because they tend to get kind of banged up. And so I'll probably do that maybe around the holidays, but I'm going to wait a little while. So I did want to read this, but I'm probably going to wait until after I read that. Sometimes I feel like James Boswell's life is sort of overshadowed by, by Samuel Johnson's, and so that's why I was really interested in reading this, and I got a pretty good price on it. So those were the two books that I got at the bookstore this past week, and I'm hoping to go back soon. I actually wanted to do kind of a video on it because me and a friend of mine who have been going there for years have a lot of kind of interesting stories about the Last Bookstore, and so we wanted to do an episode on it. And so actually also coming up, I'm planning on doing an episode about an author who has a lot of ties with the local area here, so I'm actually hoping to get out of the house and kind of go around and talk about different locations that are associated with that author, so I'm going to have a whole special episode about that. I'm kind of starting to see why people find it a little bit easier to sort of just do book reviews and review things from home, because that's a lot easier than going out and shooting videos and editing them. But hopefully if I have enough time, I'm going to be doing that in the next couple weeks here, and so stay on the lookout. I'm going to hopefully have that up pretty soon.